Russia says that the latest US threat to use military force against the Syrian government is an unacceptable provocation. Let me wind this back for you. The White House earlier claimed today that the Assad leadership is preparing to launch a chemical weapons attack in Syria. President Trump's press secretary says the US will take action if that happened.
The United States has identified potential preparations for another chemical weapons attack by the Assad regime. The United States is in Syria to eliminate the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. If, however, Mr. Assad conducts another mass murder attack using chemical weapons, he and his military will pay a heavy price.
Following on from that, Britain's Defence Secretary is pledging the UK's support for any US action to prevent another chemical attack in Syria. But Michael Fallon then went on to admit that he hadn't actually seen the intelligence that Washington was basing its allegations on. RT's Paula Sleer has more.
They say that they've detected potential preparations that would likely result in mass civilian casualties. They talk about the mass murder of innocent children. Now, certainly, in order to be able to sell a message as serious as this, you need that kind of emotional pitch that talks about innocent children being killed. The statement also references potential preparations, but it doesn't give any kind of details as to what those potential preparations involve. So what does it mean, other than that it is similar to what the US detected before the last chemical attack back in April? The statement also says that any chemical attack in Syria in the immediate future will be blamed on Assad and his allies. Now, this is without any kind of investigation, without any kind of due process, just punishment. It's worth looking at the timing of the statement as well. Assad and his army are making major gains inside the country, especially against terrorist groups such as Islamic State.
Well, the US allegations come despite Moscow's latest call for Washington to stay clear of provocations in Syria. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made that comment in a phone conversation with his US counterpart. That call apparently was initiated by Washington and was the first time the diplomats had spoken almost face-to-face, if you want to put it that way, since the downing of a Syrian military jet by the US more than a week ago. The two apparently discussed the need to consolidate a ceasefire in Syria, as well as suppressing attempts to use chemical weapons by any party in that conflict. And as mentioned, Mr. Lavrov stressed that the US avoids provocations like shooting down Syrian aircraft. Let's go live to International Affairs Professor Sriram Chalia, get his thoughts on what might be happening here. Hi, nice to see you. So, the White House claiming it has got intelligence pointing to a planned chemical attack by the Syrian government. The UK's not seen it, must be said. What would Damascus possibly gain by carrying out an attack like that on its own soil? Again, we've asked this question so many times over the same allegations that have come out over the years. But again, it's very valid. Why would it do it?
It beats me, Kevin. I think, intelligence, the so-called intelligence that the Americans often put out as a pretext for taking military action has often been politicized and is not necessarily very accurate. I don't think they have access to the inside of the Syrian regime to determine, to find out what they're determining in terms of where they will attack and what means they will use. I am more concerned of this as being part of this turf war that's going on, wherein, the Americans since the Trump administration has come in, has sided more and more with Saudi Arabia, and they want to put the Assad regime under extreme pressure and possibly bring about its downfall. After the Shayrat air base was attacked in April, again, after an alleged chemical attack, it was said that this was going to be a one-off thing and it would not be repeated. But since then, the trends have not been encouraging. The U.S. policy is becoming more and more dangerous. They brought down a Syrian aircraft recently. They have been shooting down Iranian-made Syrian drones that are keeping an eye on ISIS. They claim that they have so-called Syrian democratic forces on the ground and that they will not yield an inch to Iran or Syrian government forces or militias backed by them. And so what we are seeing is, in the pretext of chemical weapons and warning the Syrian government, what they are saying is essentially stay away from our areas. And they want to carve out basically a statelet of their own. Basically, Saudi Arabia's ultimate goal is to break up Syria and to have a Sunni state that is dominated either by ISIS or by some form of Sunni government that is amenable to Saudi Arabia's diktats. So in the name of chemical weapons, what is going on is this. They're staking out territory, telling the Syrians and the Russians and the Iranians Iranians, stay out of our zone, and if you come in, then we will use chemical weapons pretext and bomb you. So I think this is a very clear game plan, and what we are seeing is not good because it means de facto division of Syria and also encouragement for ISIS that relies on the disunity of all the different factions in Syria.
You used the word pretext there. That's the worry, isn't it? There's a saying goes that if you say something enough, mud sticks. Russian officials have been calling out the US for failing to investigate, they say properly, that previous chemical incident in Syria back in April, the one you were talking about there. The worry is it doesn't look like it's going to need much for the US to use it as an excuse if it decides to bomb the Syrian government forces again for something it's not even planning on doing. Again, a pretext, and the more it's said, maybe the US will think the more it's going to be believed.
Well, no, I don't think the people of the world can believe this because the Americans themselves have been named by the United Nations that their aerial bombardment has caused massive civilian deaths and displacement in and around Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, as well as in Iraq around Mosul. So right now, it's like the case of the pot calling the kettle black, because you have a situation where the coalition, Western coalition forces are causing maximum human rights abuses on the ground by indiscriminate aerial bombardment. Hundreds have already been killed and possibly thousands. So we have a situation where they are talking about babies being gassed, when on the other hand, their aerial bombardment has been so indiscriminate. And if you spread the net wider, it's not just in Syria and Iraq. Their ally Saudi Arabia is doing the same in Yemen. So if you count up all of those, the atrocities are very severe on that side too. So for them to now say, we will come and police you and stop you from using chemical weapons, it's so ironic because there was in fact reports of them using banned chemical substances in their aerial warfare themselves. So I think the Western coalition simply using chemical weapons as a pretext, as I said before, as an alibi to try and push the Syrian state from regaining control over ISIS-controlled territory.
It's such a complicated picture and not all at all what it seems to be on the surface behind the scenes, as you say. And Sriram Chowla, International Affairs Professor, thanks for giving us your thoughts on the latest update.